Namaste, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well and are taking care of yourselves. Welcome to the first of the series of TTC webinars. I know we have had a few webinars as a part of the TTC meetups, but this is an exclusive series, and this is the first one of that series. So welcome to the webinar here. Well, we will just wait for a minute for other attendees to join in, and then we will start. In the meantime, let's wait for a minute before I ask you some questions and we get ahead. And I'm stopping the share right now because I want to share something else with you guys. Okay, great to have all of you here this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to quickly share a poll with you and let you all answer those 3 questions asked in the poll. So here you go. You have a poll in front of you. You should have it. Please respond to the poll, and then we can get started with things. Well, the responses are trickling in, and from what I can see, as the result on the poll, there are some very interesting responses that I am getting. Well, quite interesting. The first question has very interesting responses. All right, some of you haven't still responded to the poll. It'll be nice if you can do so. Okay, looks like we've had almost everybody answering the poll. So I'll end the poll here. Well, very interesting results And I will just go ahead and share the results with you. If you can see the results on your screen now, can you see it, or do I need to share my screen? I probably need to. Okay, thank you, Jyoti. You can see the results. So quite interestingly, only 33% of the respondents actually do risk analysis before initiating or while working with test automation. And a staggering 67% of you fall in the category of actually not doing it. 8% of you don't do it at all. 29% of you do it sometimes. 25% of you do not know how to analyze risks, which is fair. But there is 4% who think that testing and risks are different. Well, that's a quite interesting take. Well, we will talk about it shortly. The next question, well, the knowledge of risks helps me to write better tests and choose better test automation tools. 83% of you believe that is true, and the remaining 17%, they don't know about it, which is okay. And the third question had me asking you, would you risk assess your automation tool as a part of your test analysis or risk analysis? And 50% of you say yes, 21% of you say no, and the rest obviously are not sure. Well, so here is the thing. Okay, testing is all about risks. You cannot leave risks and testing aside and go ahead, because when you are testing something, you are constantly asking questions. What if this doesn't work? Which means that if something doesn't work, then you expect something absolutely untoward happening. So if somebody is thinking that testing and risks are two different things, well, then you would be surprised to know that they are actually very important and are interrelated. Testing shows the absence or presence of risks in a particular system. So they are interlinked. So hopefully that answers your question up front, and then maybe next time you will look at it. So based on the results that we have got, I will go ahead and share my screen once again and share with you the slides that I've got to present. Let me do that. All right, so today we are going to be talking about risks in test automation, going beyond the obvious. Now, first of all, just a 5 seconds introduction about myself. I am a senior test consultant with Sogeti in the Netherlands. This is my LinkedIn URL or profile and my Twitter handle. Well, of course, you can go to LinkedIn or Twitter and just Google up my name, Brijesh Deb, and you will see this picture and you can find me. So that's the easiest way, rather than copying the entire URL or my Twitter handle. Next, let's first of all understand what do we mean by risks. But before that, let's look at the agenda. We look at what are risks, what is test automation, what are risks in test automation. Then can we use test automation for risk mitigation? Then we also look at the downside of risk analysis. We draw a conclusion, and then we have a live Q&A. First of all, what are risks? The probability of occurrence of an unexpected outcome causing a negative impact. That is what a risk is. So basically, if there are clouds outside, low-hanging clouds outside, and you are, suppose, in the season of monsoon, then stepping out of the house without an umbrella is actually taking a risk, because there is a chance of rain happening and you getting wet. So the probability of it raining and you getting drenched is the risk when you see low hanging clouds during the monsoon season. And carrying the umbrella with you is actually the mitigation for that risk. So you can translate the same thing to your projects. The probability of the system not working or not responding or giving an unexpected response is the risk that may happen. And you writing your test cases and testing to ensure that that risk does not happen is what is the mitigation that is you are doing. Okay, so what we have to understand is that there is an element of risk with every project that we do. There is an element of risk in everything that we do, and it is therefore important for us to understand what risks are and how do we mitigate them. Okay, now let's look at the categories of risk that we have. Number one is project risk. Project risks are the risks that may happen which may impact the functioning of the project. For example, now we had the festival of Diwali over the weekend. Now it was lucky for a lot of projects where the festival occurred on weekend. But normally when it happens during weekdays, a lot of people take a break and go on vacation or visit their families. And that is a risk that you run into with regards to the project. Because if you have work assigned, too many people taking leave at the same time will cause a hamper, will hamper your productivity, which means that there is a chance of the project not meeting its timeline. So that is a project risk that happens right there. That is an example of a project risk. When the project timelines are affected, then it is an example of a project risk, or when the project is directly impacted. Okay, whether it is with regards to availability of computers, for example, or availability of people, or availability of funds. Okay, anything that impacts the project causes a project risk. The next one is a product risk. Now, for example, you are, testing a laptop. Okay, the laptop is the product that you are testing, and if you see that there are serious circuit issues within the layout of the laptop, and your keystrokes are not working fine, or something is going haywire between the connection in the screen and the keyboard and things like that, then you call it a product risk. Okay, finally, you have what we call as business risk. Anything that has a financial impact on the product, on the application, on the project is a business risk. So I spoke to you about availability of funds. Now that is a serious business risk as well. While it impacts the project, it impacts the business as well. So if there is a situation where there are no funds to support the project anymore, it is a business risk. Or if the product that you're building creates a negative impact in the market or fails miserably, then it is a risk to the business that you are working on. So that is something that you have to be aware of. I see that there is a question asked in the Q&A section. Thank you for that question. We will handle all the questions at the end of the webinar. Now moving on, let's look at what test automation is. So I would like you to understand this, that test automation is the automation of certain test procedures using a code or a tool. When we talk of test automation, it is not necessarily converting what we call as manual tests into tests that are run by the machine. These are automating or letting the machine run certain test procedures on its own using a code or a tool, which means that if you have to generate test data and you are letting the machine do that for you, it is a part or it is a procedure that you are running. That is also test automation. It means that if you are going to monitor a particular system and you are letting the machine do the monitoring on your behalf by writing some code or letting some tool do the monitoring, that is also test automation. Test automation is not necessarily just converting some test cases into a piece of code and running it. It is much more than that. It is very important that we understand this distinction of what test automation is. Now, when we talk about test automation, just like anything else, there are a lot of risks that are involved in test automation. Let's look at some of the risks that are there in test automation. First, let's look at the obvious or the elephant in the room. First one is less or zero return on investment. It's quite the obvious. So when people start thinking of automation, the first question that comes to the mind is, okay, what is going to be my ROI? What is going to be the return that I'm going to get on the investment that I'm going to make towards automating these tests? That is the first question that comes to mind. And you always have the risk of your automation failing and you getting zero returns or very less returns in compared to what you've invested. That risk is always there. Secondly, the technology is constantly evolving. And what it means is that the testing has to play catch up. Testers will always need to be coping up to the technology and the changes that are happening. So you will see, different products having different tools or different systems or different technology being employed to build certain products, which means that the testers will also have to be aware of those technical changes that are happening, thereby taking control and doing the testing more effectively. Third one is the cost of maintenance of the tests. So the tests that you automate or the procedures that you automate will need to be maintained. You will need to make sure that release after release, those tests are giving you the results that you require, which will require very high maintenance. Finally, or the fourth point is that the testers have a steep learning curve, which means that they have to not only learn the automation tool, but they have to learn the technology, they have to learn the domain, they have a lot to catch up, which means the learning curve for them is pretty steep. And this is a very obvious risk that you are running into. So you have to be cognizant of all these factors when you are stepping into automation. Finally, there are inadequate test tools. Now, very often we hear the term nowadays of in-sprint automation, which means that if we take the Scrum framework, then we obviously are targeting to automate all the tests within the sprint itself. Also, alongside that, there is a huge roar for automating across different layers. Now, if you have to take a judicious decision, if you have to make sure that you are capable of doing in-sprint automation and you are also capable of doing testing in the right layer, and you are also able to support end-to-end automation, then you have to look at tools which help you do that, right? You have to look at maybe one tool which does all of these for you. You have to look at one tool which is capable of doing end-to-end automation, which is capable of helping you test across the various layers, and which will help you build your tests very quickly so that you are able to do in-sprint automation. One of the tools that lets you do that very easily is something called Test Project. That is a tool that I have been playing with for a while now, and it is very effective in doing that. But when you are taking a conscious business decision of automating stuff, you have to evaluate, does your tool that you've chosen lets you do this, is capable enough of handling all the situations? If not, if you just think, oh, from a UI perspective, it lets me do UI testing effectively, then let me just pick up and run with it. Sooner or later, you are going to hit that roadblock. So you have to be very, very efficient in thinking of this particular risk of inadequacy upfront, and then try and take a step to challenge this situation. Now let's look at some of the not so obvious risks. How many times do we think of automated tests having a limited scope? We don't. We just go ahead and say, okay, let's automate. Okay, do we think of the scope of automation very often? It is not obvious risk, but it is still a risk, because we have to understand that within the testing that you are doing, and if you are running a set of automated tests, or if you are trying to automate some of your test procedures, then they are always going to have a limited scope or limited purview. Then the focus remains on testing the application, and what we a lot of times end up with is a lot of untested test code, the code that you have written for your test, the framework that you have written. A lot of time it goes untested, and consequently what happens is a lot of times you are solving the problem created by the automation framework rather than solving the problem for the customer. So we end up spending a lot of time trying to test or fix the bugs that are there in the framework rather than fix the bugs in the application. A lot of times when the test fails, you are not able to find out whether it is a bug due to the failure in the product or a bug due to a failure in the test framework. So one of the risks that you run into is a lot of untested test code, and you have to be always aware of that upfront. Now, when we are doing automation, and it starts becoming successful, then obviously there are certain unrealistic expectations. People start thinking of 100% automation coverage. You have to be aware right from the outset that there is nothing called 100% test automation coverage. It is impossible. 100% test coverage itself is impossible. So 100% automation coverage is also impossible. Yes, you may say that, okay, based on my analysis, A, B, C are the parts which I'm going to automate. For those three parts, I have chosen a certain amount or certain number of tests which I'm going to automate. If all the tests that I have chosen are automated, then I will achieve a state of 100% automation coverage. If you give that perspective to everybody, then you are clear about what your expectation is. But in general, what 100% automation coverage means, that you are trying to automate the entire application, which is an absolutely unrealistic expectation. The next point is over-dependence on automation. This is a risk that you run into when you have successful automation cycles over a period of time. Now, what the assumption that comes into the minds of a lot of people is that when you start automating stuff and when you start getting successful about it, there is a lot of dependence and you try and automate everything that comes in your way. Well, sometimes it works, but a lot of times you end up getting weird results, and it does not work for you, and it sort of shakes your belief off. So do not try to depend on automation for everything. There are still tasks which can be done without automating them. Don't try and automate simple procedures if you can do it without code or without tool. If you can do it without that, do it. For example, if you are in a situation where you have to calculate something like a 2 plus 2, don't always go to a calculator and use a calculator. You can do 2 plus 2 without a calculator as well. So for simple things, don't spend too much time in automating, because the time in building automation is considerably high. You have to always remember that. And then so I spoke about some of the obvious risks in the previous slide. If there is too much focus on trying to automate, you miss those obvious risks as well. There is a chance that you might miss out on one of those. So you have to be very, 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 very careful when talking about risks in test automation and thinking about them. Now, having said this, having looked at the risks in test automation, now we have a lot of risks in the application. When we start doing our testing, we try and do risk analysis, and we look at the project risk, we look at the product risk, we look at the business risk. Now, there are situations when automation is the solution to mitigate those risks. Okay, but before that, there's something that's something that really important that I want to talk about is the piece where I was talking about building unrealistic expectations. There is something that we don't do very often, and what we don't do very often is something called as feasibility analysis. Feasibility analysis is an exercise which, in my opinion, needs to be done every time you think of automating your tests. And what happens generally is that when we are setting up our goal, or when we are setting up our vision for automation, people just somehow think of, okay, so this is what we're going to automate, these are the tools we may need, and we just start and we just need to get it done with. Is automation actually feasible in the application is something that needs to be checked. If it is feasible, then what parts can be automated? What are the areas where you can actually apply testing across the layer, or is it possible to test end to end, or it is possible to use a particular tool, or is it possible to generate data for? Okay, these are the situations that your feasibility analysis will give you, and this is an exercise which needs to be done upfront. Now, in an interesting poll that I ran on the Telegram TTC group, I saw some very interesting results. 57% said that they always do a feasibility analysis before initiating automation in their project, which is fantastic. 3% said they did not. 16% of them do it sometimes. I do not know why sometimes. Okay. 12% respondents said that they do not know what feasibility analysis is. Well, okay, we'll come to that. And then there is this interesting 12% who says that my management does not care. Now that is a spot which actually made me think of a particular situation where your management wants results from you. But in order for the results to be effective, in order for the results to show up as something of value to the customer, you must be able to tell your customer that the value that you're trying to bring in with the feasibility analysis. Okay, you have to show that, okay, if you're talking about automation, if the management says, okay, no, we need to get automation going in the project, you need to do a thorough analysis. Okay, investigate if automation is indeed possible, if automation will add value. If it is possible, then what are the parts which can be automated easily? What are the parts where automation is a little complex? What are the parts where you could do, one set of tools that can solve a problem? If there is a tool that can solve all your problems, then which is that tool? You do all of this analysis and give them the result of that analysis first, rather than just simply jumping on to automation. You have to do this analysis first and then convince the management, or tell the management as to why this feasibility analysis is important. Show them that, what, your goal is to get to the customer quickly. Understood. Fantastic. You want defect-free releases. Fantastic. But in order to be able to do both of them, we need to make sure that the automation that we are doing is effective enough. We need to make sure that whatever automation we do is giving you the result that you require. The automation that we do should be able to solve the problem that we are trying to solve for the customer. It should not create more problems, because there is a lot of investment that is going to be made. There is a lot of resource investment that is going to be made. There is a lot of time investment that is going to be made. There is a lot of money or financial investment that is going to be made. So it is very important that the management sees the value correctly. So if you think that your management does not care about a feasibility analysis, then it is time for you to start thinking as to how you can go back and educate the management. That is probably where the management will require some education, will need to understand the value that you're trying to bring in through this exercise. For those of you who do not know what feasibility analysis is, in very simple words, it is an exercise that you carry out to see if automation is actually possible in the project or not. If it is possible, what will be its effectiveness? It is a simple exercise. You ask a lot of questions. If you want me to help you with learning that, we can definitely go ahead and do a workshop on that. Moving on, now that we've spoken enough about the risk in automation, let's look at using automation for mitigating other risks. Number one, human error reduction. Now, in systems where, or in places where there is a lot of dependency on human intervention, there is a potential risk that you run into, that there might sometimes be error, which is quite natural, which is quite normal. Automation does the job of mitigating that risk for you. Now, if there are places or projects which require to verify compliance or data integrity, automation is a good source of getting that done as well. Finally, you can focus your effort on certain things when you are trying to automate. You have a fixed set of tests, or you have a fixed set of procedures that you can run repeatedly, and you can have automation there as well. And then, most importantly, you have increased transparency, where the results that you get from your automation are seen by a lot of people, and you can take quicker, faster business decisions based on the results that you get from your automation. So it helps you getting to your goal faster. It helps you in getting faster feedback and making things a lot more transparent. And most importantly, it gives you greater agility. So projects which are agile in nature, projects which involve the DevOps culture, that is where you need more and more automation, because that helps you get to the goal of the project faster. That helps you reduce the time to market. That helps you test better in a much more efficient way. Now, when I say this, please be aware of the fact that that is not the only solution. You require automation working in tandem with testing. Automation and testing are two different things that we are talking about. When we are talking about test automation, you are trying to automate certain procedures, not all of them. You have to be always aware of that. So when you work with both together, you get better, faster results. Now, we've spoken enough about risk analysis, but are there some drawbacks, or are there some challenges, or is there a downside? Risk analysis is a time-consuming exercise. Yes, it is. You need to collaborate a lot. You will need the buy-in of your developers. You will need the buy-in of your fellow testers, of the architects, of the product owners, of the stakeholders, of the customer, everybody. Which means that you need to have everybody's time available when you ask these questions, and when you ask them, okay, what are the kind of challenges that you might face, or what do you think is the alternate approach. So you keep on seeing this more and more, and that's why it is a time-consuming exercise. Risk analysis, at the end of your risk analysis, you get a lot of results which are subject to biases, and you may have subjective opinions on your analysis and the results from people. What might appear to be a risk to you might not appear to be a risk to a developer. It may happen such way. So there is a lot of subjectivity also that comes in. You have, in your analysis, normally when you do your analysis, you have qualitative analysis, you have quantitative analysis. So you have different approaches of doing your analysis. So whatever support you can give to your claim of a risk and its mitigation should have a proper data backing up your research or the work that you have done. That way you eliminate some of the biases, but not always. And finally, it is very difficult to implement. Because it needs consensus, because it needs collaboration, because it needs everybody to be on the same page. It is something really, really difficult to implement. We have to be aware of what is happening. No, so before I come to the final slide and say thank you, I want to conclude by saying that risk analysis is quite an important exercise that you need to do as a part of your whole testing process, but also very important to do a risk analysis before you start your automation or even during your automation. You must always constantly keep on analyzing the risks. Risk analysis is not a one-time thing. It needs to be analyzed periodically. Doing it at the start saves you a lot of time, cost, and money, and effort. And if you constantly do it, then you are able to monitor the whole situation. You are able to take the situation in your control and be more effective with your risk analysis. Now, finally, I want to thank the test project, which has supported this particular webinar. You can check out test project at testproject.io. And with this, I also want to announce that at the test chat group, we are going to be doing a contest. And I want to announce that contest right now. The contest is find your favorite feature. So you're going to look at test project. It is open source. You can do everything for free. You're going to look at test project. You are going to play around with it. And on the 1st of December on the 1st of December, you're going to submit your entries with the best feature that you've found out. There will be 10 lucky winners who will be getting free pass to the Test Fest conference, which is happening in December. And there will be one lucky winner who gets passes to 2 conferences in December and a surprise gift from Test Project. So I will repeat the contest once again. You have to go and check out Test Project at testproject.io if you have not done so already. And then you have got to play around with the different features. Now, if you are somebody who's new to automation or has never tried automation, you have nothing to worry about. There is a feature in Test Project which is codeless, and you don't have to spend any effort in trying to code things. You can play around with it very easily. So this is for you as well. So go check it out. Try the different features, try out what all you can, and then list out your favorite features and then send us your entries. We will look at 10 winners. 10 winners will get a free pass to Test Fest USA, so you can attend the conference. Then there will be one lucky winner, which will be chosen out of those 10, who gets access to not just Test Fest USA, but also to GTR 2020, which is happening in December again. And you also get a surprise gift from Test Project. With that, I would like to thank you, and I would like to have any questions that you may have. So I will stop the share right now and look at your questions. First, looking at the chat. Okay. So there is a question here. Any framework available for risk analysis so that we can use it? Of course. So you have something called as the failure mode effect analysis, or FMEA, which is a very commonly used algorithm. Plus, there are other risk analysis techniques that are available. We can do a risk. We are, of course, working on a risk analysis workshop with the test chat group, and we're going to announce that soon. But FMEA is a world-renowned technique. You can rely on that for doing very effective risk analysis. From Sharon says, how can you ensure automation can help make better business decisions when a lot of time no one seems to know the actual coverage? Are there any recommended approaches that can make coverage clear across unit API and end-to-end testing. I hope you meant end-to-end, you written E3E. Well, that is a very good question, Sharon. So, yes, that's what I thought. So that is a very good question, Sharon. This is where, your feasibility analysis comes very handy. So when you do your feasibility analysis, when you say, okay, I am, or your business stakeholders, they say that they are going to do, would like you to automate a lot of things within the project. You tell them, okay, let's see how feasible is automation and how effective it will be. Okay, so we do not know what the actual coverage is going to be, but let's see what features can actually be automated. And for that feasibility analysis, you will have to collaborate with the developers, with the architects, with the product owners, and sit across the table and see how does it look like to automate whatever you are thinking to automate. Okay, and once you do that, then you will come to an approximate. I should not use the word guess, but an approximate idea of the amount of automation coverage that you are going to see. So you start with that. Now that approximate idea that you've had will obviously change over a period of time depending on the ease or difficulty of automating stuff. The choices that you make at that point of time will decide if your automation is getting in the right direction or not. Okay. Also, when you're talking about testing coverage across unit, API, UI, the various layers, well, you have to choose wisely whether you are trying to focus on automation from a test pyramid perspective or something that you've created on your own. And if you are looking to automate based on your test pyramid, then obviously you will try and do more and more automation at the lower level, which means that your automation testing will need to support the efforts of unit testing, which means that you might choose approaches like test-driven development, which starts very early, so you can join in the developers in building their unit testing more effectively. Now, there is a common assumption that is made that testers cannot participate in unit testing. I think that is no longer the case in the modern day. There have been multiple situations or multiple articles have been written about it. There was a presentation that was done recently by Abhijit Weicker, one of our members from the test chat group, on how he does help the developers with unit testing and how testers can contribute towards unit testing. So that is obviously there. You can take a look at the presentation on the test chat YouTube channel if you want to understand that. For API testing, for UI testing, we know that automation is extremely effective. But then again, your feasibility analysis will tell you if it is entirely doable or not. Now, a lot of times, what also happens is that you start thinking that okay, it's just UI testing, and I may be able to automate it very easily. But we have seen disasters happening where UI testing. Automation of UI testing has failed, and looking deeper into the reasons, you see that most of the times it is to do with something like the elements are not found, or there is inconsistency in the way the elements are written or designed, and your automation is hitting those kind of roadblocks, and you do not have a mitigation plan. Well, that's where you need to think of tools which have that intelligence built in. So you have tools like Test Project, like Karate DSL, which have mechanisms of dealing with such situations. So you have to think very effectively around that, and so for me, the most recommended approach for making coverage clear across multiple layers would be to begin with a feasibility analysis. If you have not done that, then you should start doing it. Start talking to people, okay? And that feasibility analysis will obviously include risk analysis as a part of the exercise, where you look at the various risks. Okay. Then in the chat itself, Ganga says test automation is useful for regression. Test when you run the same test with every cycle. Testimony is one tool where you can. Yes, of course, that is. Can you share some links to the study of FMEA? Of course, I can. I will share it when I share the slides. I will share the necessary material also along with it. Okay, I will share the other techniques for risk analysis also. Okay, Balachandran says, if risk analysis is a continuous process across automation development cycle, won't that affect time available to automate? Well, that is a very good question. So, of course, risk analysis is a time-consuming process, like I said, but you can be very wise with it. When to do risk analysis is a very important question. And one of my advice for teams working in Scrum, okay, is when you do your sprint planning, okay, before that, if you do an exercise of grooming your backlog, that's when you push in your risk analysis session as well. So when you are looking at your backlog, when you are analyzing the stories before you pass it on to the next sprint and you do your sprint planning, that is the time when you do your risk analysis as well. And you bake it into the process that you do everything combined. That's when you get the product owner, the developers, and everybody together. And that's one occasion where everybody is together and is collaborating, and that's when you do it. Okay. You may also choose to depending upon the maturity of the team, you can also choose to do it every alternate sprint, depending on everybody's availability and everybody's comfort. If you are too confident of everybody's abilities, then you can do it every sprint. If everybody is not too comfortable, then you can do it once in 2 sprints or something like that. So it again depends on the maturity that you have. It is always a good idea to do it then, or maybe you can do it after the retrospective as well, because in the retrospective you get a lot of action points, and those action points can be a trigger for certain risks to occur. Okay, so you have to choose very wisely the situation in your team and then decide when you want to do it. It is a very good question, in fact. So I hope I have managed to answer your question, Balachandran. Well, delay in project kickoff will be a project risk. Yes, definitely. So Apnil, that is true. To master feasibility analysis, does it come only by experience? Well, yes, you have to do it over a period of time to become master, just like anything else. But then the important thing is to start doing it. It is to start asking questions. Okay. Don't we need to test automation scripts? Of course, you need to test. Not sure how we can calculate ROI. Well, this is a question that a lot of people ask. How do you calculate ROI? So ROI is basically it depends on how do you want to measure it. So if you want to measure it straight away against the money that is invested in building up your automation and seeing the results or the value that you're getting out of it, or the money that you're getting in return, you can do it that way, or you can do it in terms of the time that you have saved by automating stuff, or you can see the effectiveness that your automation has brought in. Okay, so there are various ways in which you can calculate ROI. I have a slightly different opinion on ROI calculations being done by testers. I don't think it is something that the testers need to be bothered about, but quite often testers get sucked up into believing that they are the ones who are responsible for deciding the ROI. ROI is a business thing and should be left to business for deciding it. What you can show them is the effectiveness of your automation, and let them then decide whether it is worth investing or not. So for that matter, you need to do a good feasibility analysis, a good effective risk analysis. Okay. Then the next question, it says, won't constant risk analysis hamper the rhythm of changes required? What would be a good interval? I think I answered that question. Well, constant risk analysis is important, but you have to decide the frequency. You can do it either at the start of the sprint or later. So it depends on that. Yeah. So also again, now looking back at the chat, Balachandran says it is tough to convince the management if the risk is found null, like carrying an umbrella when the sun shines. That's a very common notion, but you have to be aware of the fact that when the sun is shining bright, the umbrella is effective in saving you from a sunstroke. So if you can look at it from that perspective and show them the value, then it is quite helpful in that situation. Well, is there a new question? Okay, how to identify the magnitude risk that is high, medium, or low? Okay, so this is to do with something called as risk priority number. Well, if you look at the risk and if you want to mark it as high, medium, or low, what you have to look at is two aspects of the risk. One is the probability of occurrence, and second is the impact that it is going to have on your system or on the testing that you're going to do. So what normally people do is use a simple mathematical formula. So they say, okay, if it is a highly probable risk that it may happen, then they assign it a value like 3. And then if it is low, so they assign it. So if it is medium, they assign 2. If it is low, then they assign 1. So they do a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. Same thing for the impact. And then to analyze whether it is the magnitude is high, they just multiply the numbers of probability of occurrence and the impact, which means that if you have assigned 3 as the number for the probability of occurrence and 3 as the number for occurrence of your or the impact, so you have 3 into 3, 9. So you will assign that number. Similarly, if you have something called something which falls in the category of high probability, which is 3, and low impact, which is 1, so you will get the product of those two as 3. So the one which had the value 9 will have higher magnitude, and the one which has 1 which will have a lower magnitude. That's the way you do it. That's risk probability number assignment. Well, so there is a risk identification workshop that is being planned for the test chat group. We'll make an announcement soon, and hopefully this will become much more clearer at that point of time. I hope I have answered all your questions. If there are any more, you can reach out to me via the test chat group or via my LinkedIn or my Twitter, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Okay, there is one more. A lot of time customer pushes to provide automation estimation, and most of it is without scope of feasibility analysis. At that point, the requirements are very high level. How to communicate this risk? Well, if the customer is asking you to push automation estimation and they do not care much about the scope of feasibility analysis. That's what I understand from your question, Rakesh. What you are going to do is, despite the customer not requesting you for a feasibility analysis, you will do a quick feasibility analysis. Nobody is stopping you from doing that. And then support your estimate with the results of the feasibility analysis. You will say that, okay, based on your request, based on your request of automating, we have gone ahead and looked at it, looked at the scope, looked at the feasibility analysis, and here is the result. And this is based on this result, we feel that this is the particular estimate. Okay, so please understand that the customers will not ask for a feasibility analysis. Feasibility analysis is something that you do as testers to safeguard yourself from any trouble that you may have. Okay, a lot of times we get sucked into the demands of the customer and we just respond to what they are doing, but we forget that as testers, it is our responsibility, or it is our duty to sort of provide the information that they need so that they can take sensible business decisions. Going back to the definition of testing, testing is all about capturing information and passing it to the stakeholders so that they can take meaningful decisions. So you have to always keep that in mind. Okay. All right. I hope, Rakesh, I managed to answer your question. Have I missed the question? Is something that I'm looking at. No. Okay. I hope I've managed to answer all your questions. If there is anything more, please reach out to me. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. It was good to interact with you. Some very good questions. We are planning on doing a risk analysis workshop, probably in December. The dates are still not known because it needs some more logistics to be sorted out. So we have still not finalized on the date, but as soon as the dates are out, the news will be on the Test Chat Telegram group and also on the social media channels for Test Chat. I once again would like to thank Test Project for supporting this webinar, for making it possible for us to do this. And like I said, don't forget to start thinking about the contest. Okay, an official announcement of the contest will be made in the Test Chat group later today. So if you're not a part of the Test Chat group, please join it. You can reach out to me and I will tell you what the link is, or you can seek from your friends. It is quite popular, so you will find out. Or I do not have it handy, otherwise I would have typed it in the chat right now. But yeah, looking forward to seeing your enthusiasm and participation in the contest. Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful evening and a great weekend ahead. Thank you.